My name is Eileen, and I'm a licensed teacher. I've taught children here in Vermont, some of Vermont's most under-resourced and vulnerable children and families for close to 30 years, including 17 years with Head Start in two different communities. I'm here to share my own lived experience in the spirit of truth and accountability, and also on behalf of the children and teachers that are still in schools. I'm not going to name individuals, but I may name agencies. My story, it's not about hurting people by calling them out, but I grew up in struggle and I've seen people in struggle. It's valuable to speak out. Basically, systems treat vulnerable people poorly. It's hard to survive on the systems. So anyhow, everything I share is true and it comes just from my personal experience, not out of malice. It's just to move things forward and to see if I can help somebody else. So I want to start a little bit about, to a certain degree, sometimes I feel people might peg me as coming from privilege, and I have had a lot of privileges in my life. But I will say childhood wasn't one of them. I was born into generational poverty. My father is French Canadian and my mother is Panamanian. Both families were incredibly poor. I was removed from my mother's care when I was 6 years old. But in that time period, that young, some of my first memories were being hungry, not having shoes. It's not that I minded you. I noticed, truthfully, when my grandmother picked us up to take us across country and we were removed, that we didn't have underwear or shoes. We were hungry, we were skinny. My sister used to steal. She was 6 years old just to feed us. So the other part of my background is my French Canadian family. I grew up in Maine once I left my mother's care. And that was also, a struggle the whole time. I grew up in the child care food program. Thank you very much. Keep sending that food, because we often didn't have a place and a home. I don't have a childhood bedroom that I remember. So anyhow, I was also removed from my father's care at age 13. And at that period in life, I spent the next, period until I graduated high school in a series of foster homes. And I do want to shout out and say thank you to those people who will probably never see this, but foster care is an important role. So I managed to survive childhood. It was not easy, I'll tell you that. And I went to college with help with the application process. There is the access issue all the time that I come up, like I'm intelligent, but the amount of forms you have to fill to figure out how to go to college when you don't have parents supporting you, it's ridiculous. So anyhow, I managed to go as an independent student, meaning I had no financial support from my family at all since forever, and graduated from college with a BA in history of all things. I had a child young and was a single parent raising him. And truthfully, when I had my son at 22, I was pressured to go back, to go to work because, the idea was that I was going to make something of myself and maybe be a little bit more like the foster care family. The last one, like middle class and successful. But instead, I went on this really important support system for children and families that is called welfare, but it's actually, reach up or whatever you want to call it now, because I wanted to spend time with my son. So at that point in life, I realized that basically I wanted to become a teacher. And so as I was raising my son in those years, and I will shout out to his dad, who is a wonderful friend and an excellent father, that he was 19 when my son was born and we barely knew each other. So we've raised him on a similar track, but as friends. So I became a teacher because I felt so strongly I didn't want any other children to have to go through what I did. You can imagine, sorry. I've met a lot of families over the years, a lot of kids. I'm looking at, have a photo here now. It's people have no idea. There's so much judgment in the world. You just don't know what it's like until you don't know where your kids are going to sleep. or heaven forbid you have a mental health problem or a substance use issue, but you're still doing your best. So all I want to say is, I met a lot of really wonderful kids and families, and I wanted to make a difference. I had this idea, like, what would have happened in my childhood if somebody would have reached a hand out to me early enough, or to my family. So I did get into Head Start. I worked for Head Start for 17 years in two different places, with years in between teaching at a variety of different child care centers, and also doing in-home care for people. I've raised many a baby, and that brings me great joy and comfort to think of. I earned my Vermont teaching license at the age of 45, actually, after all those years teaching, and most of that time I did not have a car. So while I was sort of creeping my way up, I was 45 in the Brattleboro area making $16 an hour and walking to work, and that's fine. I was in great shape. But again, it's a struggle. There were times where my heat turned off, and like I opened the oven door, and like, oh, you don't want your kid to know the struggle. But I did earn my teaching license because along those years, I took about 15 classes in early childhood education, and I got my license. And in that period of time, I worked multiple jobs. I actually trained and mentored other teachers. I did professional development on a lot of social emotional topics, and infant toddler care and supervision and that kind of thing. I did a lot of home visiting, which is vital. I hope early educators out there will continue to do that, to go in with a really open heart to people's homes and be respectful, and imagine what you'll learn and the difference you can make when you work together. So anyhow, you can tell that my career was heartfelt and I was on a mission. I will also point out that I was compelled through urgency of survival throughout life to work my ass off. That's how you survive when you're in whatever crisis you're in. It's never easy. When people see me in a wheelchair, being disabled is exhausting, and I barely move. Anyhow, that's a whole different topic. So anyhow, let's fast forward a few years. I moved up to the Burlington area after I got my teaching license. And when the COVID pandemic began, I was working for Head Start, Champlain Valley Head Start. I absolutely loved that job. I met a lot of great, again, children and families, learned about the community here, worked in the Old North End with a lot of new American families. And it was a hard experience, but a great experience. But right as COVID began, I switched. I was working as kind of a hybrid home visitor parent support person, and also teaching infants and toddlers part-time and roaming into different classrooms. And I purposely chose to join a brand new classroom that needed a teacher so they could run and reopen in the summer of 2020. And, of course I'm going to step up. And also it was toddlers, which I've done equal time with infants and toddlers as I have preschoolers. I don't have a favorite, but there's something delightful about little ones. And so I stepped into a toddler classroom, myself and two other teachers, during extremely uncertain times. Our small classroom, we had 6 toddlers in it with 5 different home languages. And the startup was incredibly stressful. At that point, we were all fully masked, and there were no vaccines available for quite a while. And I'll say it wasn't so much that I wasn't afraid of COVID per se. I'm just generally a fitness health enthusiast, so I'm likely to avoid anything that seems unhealthy. But I definitely had a little bit of a attitude like, I'm healthy and I'm on my rowing machine and all that bullshit. That ship has now sailed. But anyhow, I wasn't particularly afraid then. I mean, I was cautious because, truthfully, there were children who had a family member that lived with them with a very serious health condition. And I had coworkers that had very serious health conditions that were complications that we had been told, if you get COVID, that these people may die. And there was no way in hell I was going to get COVID and pass it on. So, I wore that mask. I sat out either in my car, winter included, outside to eat, or sometimes in the closet when we didn't have coverage because we were so short staffed. But, I followed all those rules. The parents had to hand their toddlers, age 1 to 3. First of all, again, 5 different home languages. The children didn't know what we were saying. They couldn't see our smiles. I worried about that. And newsflash, they didn't mind that. Once they learned to trust us, they learned through our twinkly eyes and our joyful smiles and our behavior. They loved us. There was no problem with that. But in the beginning, it was scary. The parent had to hand their child over a gate, a fence, a chain link fence out, and we would one by one take the temperature. Have you been around anybody with any symptoms of anything? Have you been out of state in the last 2 weeks? And again, these are people that don't understand English. We had interpreters in the beginning, but it was challenging. And then not to mention just how the children felt. When you were prying them away from their mom and dad like that, oh, it was hard. So anyhow, we did it, and I want to say we did turn this kind of start around because, again, you can convey having a big heart and loving what you do and being a supportive community member with the mask on or with one off. And these days, please put your mask on. That is supportive to me as a immunocompromised disabled woman. So thank you to those of you that do that. But I will say the children were delightful. We built a community garden. Like we joined we were in I won't say what site I was at, but a community garden space. And we took those toddlers in there and we learned about plants. We went sledding. We had a heck of a lot of crying, lots of crying, teeny tiny room. In the beginning, they were stressed out, but it was joyful. And I could go on a lot about that and I'll move on from there. I will say a year later, I was promoted to supervisor. And I began supervising the site that I had been working at for the past year, as well as another site that I'd worked at for the previous 3 or 4 years. And supervising, I mean loosely. One site, it's oversight of the well-being of the early Head Start and Head Start children in those classrooms. So I had to make sure their health records were up to date and that we knew if somebody had an allergy that everybody knew what to do and there was a health protocol and, do they know their safety drills and also what kind of supports are the families getting. So my job was curriculum and oversight, visiting classrooms, having meetings with teachers, direct supervision of a number of teachers. And it was incredibly stressful. I left the teaching job, I'll tell you. I thought it was going to be easier. I thought, oh God, that was a hard year. And I'm getting old and I'm going to help the teachers by being a supervisor. And I think now I got to say it was worse, because the teachers we didn't have enough staff. And COVID was still going on. Of course, people are sick. And in those days, you get sick. I will say in the very beginning, we had 2 weeks off if you got sick. And that was extra sick time. And I want to say, where is that policy? Because bring that shit back. I'm sorry for swearing, but it's important. I'm a grandmother. And if people are out sick, you need to be out sick. You don't want to be spreading this in schools. It's dangerous. So anyhow, but because of that, the show had to go on, the classrooms had to run. And so I basically started doing 2 jobs and the management knew it. It was just what it was. It's not safe in the classrooms if you don't have a certain number of children. There's no way I'm going to be overseeing a classroom where the teachers are like, we're scared. The kids are going to run away. They're hurting us. They're hurting each other. There's no way I'm not going to step in under that circumstance and come into the classroom. But I will say, I certainly begged for relief. I begged for, can we close these classrooms down? Can we get some extra help for some of these kids, that have some challenges, no fault of their own. They need extra help. They have rights as well to a beautiful education where they feel they can express themselves and learn and be adapted to. So I basically spent the next year and a half doing 2 jobs. My main job was supervisor, and the part-time job was like anything else that would need to go wrong when your classroom, somebody called out, everybody called out. Once I had to call every single family member in the morning of the whole site. Oh, no teachers today. So it was hard work. So at some point in 2022, in the late summer, early fall, I had my first COVID infection. And I want to say that every exposure I've had to COVID was through somebody that did not know they had it. So I'm going to say blameless. And even if, you know what I mean, even if you knew you had it, in those days, people's public health is to blame because it hasn't been clear. But in that, this person didn't know, the next day, by the time, oh, by the way, oh, we tested positive, I didn't have enough information to know, I should have isolated at that point. So it went through our household. I will tell you, it's a fact that you can have COVID and be asymptomatic, because there were three of us in the household. Two of us were clearly positive, and we all had varying symptoms. My boyfriend literally took a nap one day, tested positive, but took a nap and then went back out about his business. Meanwhile, I felt miserable, but it was like a bad flu. But already my head was hurting, my throat was hurting, I'm coughing, I'm tight, I'm miserable, and I'm really emotional. And my heart's, it's just everything was bad. But third person in our household, you'd never know he had anything, but he did test positive. So I just want to say, um, the tests are no, you do need to test for COVID to know you're not spreading it. You can spread it asymptomatically. So anyhow, that was my COVID infection, and I actually recovered within a couple of weeks. I was back. I actually went out on a little vacations, doing my usual thing. I was super active then. I was in a rowing machine contest and just consistently cranking out or whatever they call it. It's not, is it meters? But I was noticing my heart rate was really high during a typical workout, like a month or two after COVID. And, I would reach out to my doctor, and this is when we're going to get into systems a little bit more, because I will get back on track. Reaching out to my doctor who I'd had for 6 years, hey, my heart rate is high. And literally throughout the months, I kept on going to initially my primary doctor. And then when he basically told me that you need to throw away your fitness trackers, because they were sending me alerts that there was a major problem with my biometrics. And he sent me an article on fitness tracker and anxiety disorders as his response to my illness, and refused to refer me to the UVM long COVID clinic or the COVID recovery clinic. And I begged him. And eventually, it's actually very hard to get a new doctor, by the way. So here's another problem. What do you do? So I'm sick as hell. I started at 98 pounds, and I'm like burning myself out. We started in the classrooms in the fall of 2022, with, in my journal, I remember writing, we only have three of seven teachers for my site that have shown up to work at the start of school. How the hell am I going to run a site with three of seven teachers? It was incredibly stressful, and you can guess what happened, right? I was told the classroom had to stay open. You'll figure it out. Well, and so I did what teachers do all the time. You do way more than you should. And I wasn't a teacher anymore. I was a supervisor. But so I worked sick for 6 months while I was desperately trying to get the medical professionals to believe me. Yes, I know I am crying when I come in, but like I really am sick. All these actually took a while to get into the long COVID clinic at the UVM. Apparently, they won't let you self-refer. So what happens if you are a person that, I don't know, doesn't have a doctor that believes you, like just about everybody with long COVID? You're not going to get into the COVID recovery clinic. I hope that's changed, by the way. I eventually was savvy enough to ask my gynecologist, who was still on my team. I couldn't find a regular doctor to refer me, and I got into the COVID recovery clinic. So push came to shove, as I was asking for relief from teaching, more help for the teachers, having lots of challenges at work. I dropped to 87 pounds. I was having chest pain all the time. I was crashing. There's something called post-exertional symptom exacerbation, and it means after an exertion. Could it be physical, like maybe you're doing a dance party with the kids? It could be mental, maybe you're studying or doing something like that, or emotional. Then the next day, 24 hours later, your whole body aches and you feel like you've got a flu. So I was quite sick. I went on protected leave at that point, and went to the COVID recovery clinic. I was diagnosed in January of 2023 with long COVID. And I'm going to tell you the diagnostic code is U09.9, because knowledge is power. You got to advocate for that and read what's on your chart, because you could get anxiety written if you're not careful. So I persisted and did find actually two doctors and it was actually three, at this point, but verified that I had long COVID, and there was a lot of tests to rule out that it couldn't be something else. But I went on leave, and I will tell you, I thought I got better. And that's something that happens with a lot of us with long COVID. I had been through physical therapy at this clinic, and I rested a lot, just kind of chilled out. And I was just kind of, truthfully, at first I thought I was having this. Well, I was sick as all hell in the beginning, but I thought, how wonderful. I'm on leave. They're still paying me. I have a disability policy. I'm going to go back to work after a nice rest. That's what I was thinking. Of course, I was also scared and miserable and sick, but I did start to get better. My physical therapist at the clinic said that she thought my only trigger for this condition, post-exertional symptom exacerbation, was stress. And if I avoided stress by exercising and going back to work, and just kind of get going, then I would be all set. And I started, we kind of had a protocol in place for me to get back into work. And I began bumping up my activity, starting to exercise a little bit more. I was walking 11,000 steps a day at that point. I took a college class, and I was like, okay, I'm ready, but I'm smart. And I'm like, this is a pretty serious illness. And we all agreed, my doctors and my physical therapist, that a gradual reentry to work with some accommodations in place was necessary. So I wrote a formal accommodation letter with the help of my doctors. And I won't go through a whole bunch of what happened with that, but I will say it was difficult to even. The whole process of requesting accommodations was incredibly difficult. There's nobody to help you. When you get sick all of a sudden, if this happens to you, anybody watching, you don't think it's going to happen to you. Heaven forbid you get in a car accident and something happens. Nobody's going to explain it to you. There's nobody that's going to tell you what to do. You're just going to be hurt and sick and like treading water, trying to figure, how do I get back to work? Am I sick? What do I do? Who's going to help me? And so anyhow, it was a difficult process, but I persevered, and push came to shove. I was fired. I didn't get my accommodations. The sticking point after a very difficult process was I wanted to use my own earned sick leave in order to return to work gradually. So I could start at 20 hours, 25, 30, 40, and so on and so forth. No, apparently that was a no. I didn't actually know I was fired. I thought my job would be secure because I actually had it in writing that we had a 6-month leave. So, I was very disappointed because, to be honest, I really did want to go back to work. I loved that job. I mean, I never got to say goodbye to the kids, the teachers, anybody. But anyhow, I got out of that accommodation process, and I without knowing that it wasn't safe for me to return without that full accommodation request, went back on leave and got an email 2 weeks later that said, oh, we assume you've resigned because you didn't show back up at work on blah, blah, blah day. Here's a link if you'd like to reapply. And by the way, your health insurance ends in less than 2 weeks on June 1st. I tell you, I told you enough about my childhood to know, it's not a surprise to you. I'm diagnosed with CPTSD from childhood. I got over some of that in my 30s and 40s as I just tried to make a better life for myself. But it was terrifying. I was traumatized, from the process of, I actually thought they loved me. I thought they wanted me to come back. I thought I was one of their best people, so that was one thing, big shocker. And you know what? There's millions of us going through this. So you too would be shocked at what happens when systems just have a policy of pushing people out if it's too tricky to keep you. But so I was scared. I got very sick. I was about 92 pounds when I was trying to get back into work, and I was walking that 11,000 steps a day. I dropped down to 85 pounds with no health insurance. I thought I was having a heart attack. I literally was. I remember one day I was crying. Somebody took me to the emergency room, and I remember saying goodbye to my son in my mind, God, I'm having a heart attack. And I had no health insurance. I will say one system that did work, and I hope this continues to work, is actually two, because I want to call out the systems that work. Thank you, Retain. Retain is a Department of Labor program that has a grant here in Vermont, and I hope that grant's still going because they saved my life. They helped me figure out how I was going to survive when that accommodation process didn't work out. I got emergency Medicaid, but I went without insurance for 3 weeks of just panic. I didn't dare to go to the doctors because I was sick. I was like, it affects your brain too. It's the whole thing is just a mess. So I did have a lawyer at that point, a pro bono lawyer who tried to help me keep some sort of a job. It just didn't work. And uh, I went ahead and I remember the day I went to pick up my belongings from my office, had been all taken out of my office and piled in the group hallway. I was 85 pounds when I went to pick up my belongings. Like there was no goodbye, nothing. I mean, I will say I had a few people that were there that I gave them a hug, the few that I felt comfortable with, but it was like the walk of shame. And I'll tell you, I did not deserve that at all. And you know what? A lot of other educators, I know many of them, they didn't deserve it either. Something's got to change about that. We gave it our all during that time. So I want to move on from this piece and then to get into the systems and where I'm at now. I lost my income. At that point, I thought I had made it. As you can tell, I've lived my whole life. I don't even want to say paycheck to paycheck, like beg, steal, or borrow. I don't steal, but you know what I mean? Like always in debt, you can't quite end me. But I finally like, hey, I'm a supervisor for Head Start. I'm making it. But you lose your income, lost my health insurance. I lost, truthfully, a lot of friends. People don't believe in long COVID. A lot of family members that literally somebody even told me that, I deserve it because I'm liberal. So I did fight back though. I filed complaints right away. I filed complaints with the Office of Head Start. I filed complaints with the Attorney General. I filed complaints with the USDA, anybody I could, because I know my rights, and you're protected. If you're getting federal funds, you need to be following the Americans with Disabilities Act, and having reasonable accommodation process. And I didn't believe that happened to me. So I filed all of these reports and really just kind of sat there feeling sick and getting worse, truthfully. My complaint to the Attorney General in Vermont, civil rights complaint, an ADA violation, and retaliatory firing is, what the complaint was about, was made, I think, in the summer of 2023. It was confusing. It's another, like, who would know to do that? And that's another point I want to say. If you're not as used to survival and happen to have a college education and spend your whole life helping people survive on the system, you're not going to figure out to do that. I don't have enough money. Like, despite, I actually live in a nice house. It's not my house and I can't eat it. It's not safe either. I got to go. But I don't have enough money for that, So anyhow, I filed my complaint and, I would say I heard back in December or January. No, it was January the following year. Turns out the Attorney General did want to talk to me about it. Now, I won't go into the details of all that. It is a pending investigation right now. But one thing I will say is that having very little resources, I am on SSDI right now, and I managed to cling to my disability policy despite the fact that they tried to say I resigned, which would have meant I might not have been able to get my benefit, right? If you resign from a job, I don't know. But so I have that income, but not enough to get a lawyer. Like, really, what am I going to do? I didn't want mediation. I was just like, I'm too sick. I was basically like, I'm filing these complaints and I'm fighting for my life, which is what I've been doing for the past 3 years. I've been so sick. I still think I'm dying. I hope not. I got a granddaughter. I haven't even babysat her yet. She's 3. So I file these complaints, and I'll tell you, it's confusing. I reached out to Vermont Legal Aid, Disability Rights Vermont, obviously the Attorney General. There is some support and validation, but a lot of it's lip service so far. It's confusing. And I'm smart. I don't mean I'm a genius. I'm not that smart. I'm also brain injured, but again, these processes, and I will also point out, while having to apply for SSDI, which is incredibly difficult. I don't want anybody to ever say again that somebody on disability, that they got that easily. bullshit. It is not easy to get disability. So anyhow, I'm going to rule that right out. It's a lot of forms. It's a lot of proving. And if you don't have medical insurance to get all these fancy referrals and you don't have a doctor that believes you, good luck getting disability. So anyhow, that was tough as well.
Can
So
I ask
yeah,
what
yeah,
is
I'm sorry.
sorry, what is
Yeah.
SSDI for people that don't know?
Oh yes, thank you. And actually, very important. And I know I speak quickly. I hate using acronyms, and I do that because they don't make sense. SSDI is the supplemental. Oh God, Social Security Disability Income. But what that means in real language is, um, some of us are disabled at different times of life. Um, if you are disabled at a point before you earn income, then you will get SSI. If you are disabled at a point that you have earned enough income that you meet a financial, uh, like I've made enough money that they've decided they're going to give me a little bit of the money I've put in all these years into my disability check. So it's a really important thing. The other thing I was able to access was long-term disability. I'm still getting long-term disability from my workplace policy. And there's another thing. Wow, that is another really difficult system. So as you can imagine, all of this made me worse. Getting fired made me worse. When I should have been resting, I was fighting for my life in multitude of ways, but I'm a fighter and I just don't give up. So I kept going. I don't know. I will say with this whole legal process, and I'll leave it at that, I ended up not receiving, I went through mediation. I didn't receive the formal rebuttal, or at least I have no evidence of receiving it. I can't find it. I thought my case was being investigated a year ago, and I just found out about a month ago that no, they were waiting for me to write a formal rebuttal to something I'd never seen. And I don't have a lawyer. So I had 1 week to come up with an abridged kind of answer, and I just sent that off. And, I'm just going to call out because I know what happened to me wasn't ethical. And what I want to know right now is it legal? I'm hoping that that will be investigated, and we'll find out shortly. So, um, the current state I'm in now is I'm living on disability income. I'm in a lot of pain most of the time. I'm pretty much what you call bedbound in the long COVID community. I actually love this wheelchair. And I want to be clear too about something. Um, these kind of mobility aids or accessibility tools are vital. This is another thing that was incredibly hard to access through the system because I look healthy. I actually can still walk. I can walk from room to room and it hurts. But when I do it, I sort of look normal, and give me a few years, see what happens, this kind of pain. So anyhow, but what I want to say why I'm tearing up about this wheelchair is not about the wheelchair. I love this wheelchair. I had to go fund me for this wheelchair. I worked hard for this wheelchair and for a used scooter as well. So no shame in that. If you have to do that, go ahead and do that as well. Maybe I can donate some point. But what's worse than being in a wheelchair, wildly worse, I don't mind this at all, is being in bed all the time in pain. It's a horrible illness. I'm not in bed watching TV. I'm in bed like trying to see if I can get my heart to stop hurting if I close my eyes and put a feet on the wall. Or maybe, whatever, like all this whole time, I see my granddaughter maybe twice a month and she lives close. And the reason is I'm not well enough to sit up. It literally like this is hard for my body. So I'm sick. I fight with the doctors all the time. They don't believe in long COVID. I had a physical therapist come do a home health evaluation just last week, and she told me, "Oh, it's just your nervous system there's something wrong with, and we can't help you." I can't feed myself anymore. I literally am not able to sit in this wheelchair well enough to make myself some chicken soup. I also have some digestive issues that are documented on my chart, but I could get Meals on Wheels, but anyhow, I won't go into that. I'm just saying it's a miserable illness and I'm not doing well. But I haven't given up and I keep up with the research. So I feel like my housing is unsafe because, I live in a house with two sets of stairs. And truthfully, with a person who didn't believe in long COVID. And let me tell you what a hell of a few years I've had with somebody that thinks, well, I know she's sick, but probably her childhood. Probably she just doesn't eat enough, you know? So I don't have the money to move out of this place. If I did, I would have quite a while ago. I've been crawling up and down my stairs for a couple years now. I have to because the kitchen is here. So, those of us with long COVID, we need help. There are people dying of this illness. I don't want to be one of them. So, I've persisted and fought with every doctor who tells me, oh, we don't know what to do about long COVID, just go home, to get more assistance. And I've finally been admitted to something called a complex care clinic at my local clinic that allows me access to a social worker who tells me she's willing to do this application called Choices for Care, which is maybe assisted living or more help in the home. So I'm only bringing this up because, again, what happens when and I went from like 55,000 to slam, life's tough. And that could happen to just about anybody. I do have this home, and that's a blessing. I'd be homeless right now, but it's not a safe home for me, and it's hard for me to get out. I'm on the wait list with Champlain Housing Trust, and as we know, housing is hard. So this is what I feel is most important, and I'm sorry I take a while to say what I have to say, but there's a bigger picture here. And this is why I'm going to pour my heart out today. It's not just about me. It's a sad story. But what's killing me when I'm in pain in bed all the time is all the other people I now know that are disabled like this and discarded. They're all fired. They're all clinging for like millions of people have this. And we're frontline workers, right? We were the ones that signed up and, oh yeah, I'll do whatever. I got 3 mandated vaccines. I'm not anti-vaccine, but I'll tell you, I didn't want them. They fired me anyhow when I got long COVID. This is happening to millions of teachers, and early education teachers are broke. They do not make much money. Maybe you have a few that are making they don't make school teacher money, and even school teachers aren't making a lot of money. And I'll tell you, it doesn't matter how much money you make anyhow once you're disabled. If we have repeat infections and COVID all the time, the research is really, really bad. Right now, 5.8 million American children have long COVID. It's after a COVID infection, 10 to 20% of children go on to have long COVID or some post-COVID health condition. That kills me. Nobody is talking about this. I mean, I worked for Head Start. Head Start is high, like health and safety is the foundation of everything else, right? If you don't have a healthy, safety body and home and everything, how are you going to learn life? How are you going to succeed in life? So for years through Head Start, we had bloodborne pathogen trainings. These are trainings designed to prevent us from catching HIV or hepatitis if somebody gets cut, at school or what have you. We were taught to, wear our gloves and, the goggles and all that sort of stuff. Where is the airborne pathogen training? Really? Where's the sick leave for teachers? Right now, they're telling kids to come to school COVID positive. That's in the state of Vermont regs, childcare regulation. Yes, you can be at school with COVID. The vulnerable teachers, I feel at this point, I'm calling people out. I'm calling out the Vermont education system, the Vermont Association for the Education of Young Children. It's something you need to speak out on, Department of Children and Families. You really need to rethink your regulations and start looking at the research on long COVID. Department of Education, everybody, whoever's overseeing the hospitals. I have a loved one right now with lung cancer, and there are employees coming in with no mask on. We are in a pandemic. What are you thinking? I just don't understand that, and I just want to really point out, I have my mask here. It's basically like washing your hands or wearing a seatbelt. It just takes getting used to. It's not a big deal, people. It's a mask. Put it on and I'm fine. It protects me. I wore one of these for 2.5 years. It wasn't a big deal. So anyhow, um, I want to say, I guess, calling out also Social Security Administration, help us. Don't make us sick applying for disability. You need to come up with some sort of a quick process for long COVID. You really do. I mean, even RFK Jr. just had a roundtable on long COVID. He compared it to cancer and AIDS. So we need some urgency here. Medicare, we need telehealth, by the way. Like, how am I going to get to my doctor's appointment? The legal system, it's too hard. People that have less skills than me aren't going to be able to get in. So, anyhow, so I'm here today. I know I said a lot, but I'm speaking out for the children because children get long COVID as well. And they're not even being identified in schools. Like, I know a lot of people that work in schools, they don't have any training whatsoever about identification with children with long COVID. And it's more common. It's the most common chronic childhood illness, surpasses asthma now. That's the journal in the American Medical Association, May 2025. So that is my piece. I guess I hope everybody will do better now that you know. And my name is Eileen.
Eileen, thank you so much. I have a couple of questions, but first I wanted to tell you I put hearts. That's my virtual way of sending
I loved that. Thank you.
sending you a hug because we can't be in person and touch each other. So I just wanted to give you that heads up that if we were there, I would be
Yes, I
holding
saw
you.
those. Thank you. That does so. Again, these are accessibility tools. Having remote work is important to me because I'm not well.
Yeah.
So thank you. It still showed me some love. Thanks.
Just I'm just thinking about your incredible journey and the symptoms that you had initially and the initial disbelief you had from the doctors and correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just summarizing. This is what I heard, and I don't know if I heard also, like, how were you able to sort of recognize that this would or could be potentially long COVID, and get yourself and start advocating yourself for yourself in this direction,
Yeah.
because that's something that obviously you would have to be very self-aware. I think about people who have had fibromyalgia, for example, and people didn't believe that
Ah,
that was a disease, right? And so people had to advocate for themselves and almost diagnose themselves.
yeah.
And so I just wonder, how it came to you that you connected your symptoms to long COVID.
Yeah, that's important. I'm going to do another shout out for Lyme disease too, which is rampant in Vermont. And yet that's another thing. How is it that that's not okay? A majorly treated, anyhow, a lot of bias out there. I think one thing, and I actually do feel, I'm glad you asked me this question. And this is not because I want to have followers, but because knowledge is power. And I've learned a few things. I'm on Instagram and I'm also public on Facebook and even on Twitter and LinkedIn. So one thing I'm going to say is please, if you have access to a smartwatch, and you feel comfortable, again, this is just my 2 cents. It's going to tell you things about, it told me my heart rate was elevated, like abnormally high, and I'd been wearing it for years. So that was the first sign. I was getting regular temperature and just alerts from it. Um, I think also because I had never really been sick before, it was just so dramatically different. I move constantly. I used to run. I used to, eat kale and tofu and all the stuff that you thought was going to help and it didn't. So that's another myth, because I was super healthy. So it was just so dramatically different and persistent, like nothing I could do. Like I keep on getting sick, and I used to never miss work, and all of a sudden that was happening. I'm trying to think. I did start because my doctors kept dismissing me. That's when you start like, well, I guess I'm going to do some research. And I knew I had heard the word long COVID. I just didn't know enough about it. I remember early in the pandemic kind of thinking, talking to a friend saying, oh, my luck will be I'll be the one that gets the long COVID, but not meaning it. So I did get it. So I think I just started researching, and that's where social media was helpful. And as much as it seems funny on Instagram, I was never big on it before. What you learn when you're disabled and you're bedbound is those are your people. And that's the way that we can still build community and have friendships. And the people in the myalgic encephalomyelitis community, it's called ME, and disrespectfully called chronic fatigue syndrome, because I'm not fatigued. I'm like incredible pain and swollen, and I got a brain problem. So, but that community also reached out to the long COVID community to help them understand our illness. In my case, I'm also diagnosed with ME.
Thank you. Sorry, other commissioners pop in if you have something else, but I just started writing questions as you were speaking. You did touch upon this in, in your story, but I'd like to be really kind of direct in talking about what has been lost by your journey. That's really our theme in this space is about land and resources
Yes, yes.
and how
Yep.
much has been lost
Yep.
from your fight, just even the advocacy that you've had to put forth to do the paperwork and to navigate a system. You had to use a lot of energy to do that. And what was lost in that process? Can you speak to that?
I think so much was lost. I mean, the first thing that was lost was my health, because at a time when I don't know that I would have gotten fully better, but I don't think I would be in this condition had I not had to fight for my life at that period. And still, I still feel like I'm fighting for my life. But more concretely, the ability to support myself financially. So, I've strongly considered, uh, maybe irrationally, but I've considered getting in my car and just driving somewhere. But you know what? I looked it up, because you do when you're desperate. It's not legal in Vermont. So I'm like, oh, well, so, I've lost my ability to be in a safe home. I don't have any ability to get myself to a different place. I kind of have to just deal with it. I live, again, the stairs are too hard for me. I have lost my career. I mean, I guess in terms of resources, though, I don't know what else one does lose other than those things. I've lost my ability to walk in the woods. I've lost my ability to pick up my granddaughter. But, I guess I will say it's a really shitty experience to work as hard as I have in life and not have a home to go to that I feel safe in. And this is not about throwing anybody under the bus. Again, it's like a physical reality in this home. It's, and there's a certain amount of, again, lack of belief. Because there's no public health speaking out on what long COVID is. The belief system in my household is, yeah, you must be getting better. We don't need a stair climber, and I don't have money for a stair climber. And even if I did, it doesn't appear to be something that is welcome in this home. So I've lost a lot.
Thank you for your courage to continue to share.
Yes.
I think the last one question we have is about recommendations. So what are the recommendations that you make for state agencies or?
Oh, yes. Thank you for asking that. I really feel like the Vermont Department of Health needs to immediately start looking into the research and focus on giving public health guidance that's visible in all social media and very clear about how dangerous COVID infections are. It's a blood vessel disease. That's the problem. So that's why there's 200, 300 symptoms, because when your blood vessels are affected, well, it's just going to pick whichever body part it decides is the weak link at that moment. So, we need guidance. We need information about masking. Right now, that's all you really have. Vaccine, you need that information and access. That's a personal decision, but we need people to have information and access so they can make that decision. You absolutely need to mandate that all medical professionals have training on long COVID and post-COVID conditions. I am so tired of people telling me that my problem is anxiety. And I have a lot of diagnoses. But even the people that diagnose me somehow don't quite, they want to latch on to that. So we need training immediately. We need to look at clean air in hospitals, in schools, in nursing homes, and of course, childcare centers. This is actually engineering. It's science. It's about how much clean air exchange and what kind of HEPA filter you have, and do you have some UV lighting. The White House has great air quality. You know, we need access to testing. We need a really clear message from the Vermont Department of Education and Child Care Services that COVID positive people are supported at home. And maybe they need resources. Maybe they need some remote, actually, they do need remote learning opportunities, because children do have it and they are going to experience flare-ups. To be pressured to go to school and in trouble if you want to do your screen time learning, they're not going to be able to do an 8-hour day in person. Not all of them. Some of them will. But we need identification first, which means you're going to have to train the teachers very quickly. Teacher unions, again, where are you? Maybe I just have missed something, but you know, you got to stand up for the rights of the people. I'd like the Social Security Administration to basically make some sort of an emergency statement on long COVID that we're going to bypass some of these multiple appeals and court dates for people. It's ridiculous. The legal system, I don't know, maybe have a hotline for long COVID, because there's just so many millions of us that are going through what I'm going through. That bothers me. We need Medicare and we need telehealth flexibilities. We need therapy. We need therapy that we can have in our own homes. So, and maybe more access to health insurance, I guess I would say. Reinfections, I will say there was an article that just came out yesterday. Reinfections double the risk of long COVID in children. So prevention is key. Like, it's just really, they're just going to have to look at that. So I just want to say that's some of my recommendations.
Well, thank you so much.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes, of course.
Early educators, I'm sure teachers too, but you need sick leave, paid sick leave, and lots of it, as much as they need. Teachers want to teach. You know, I was pressured. That was the other thing. Like, we basically fired people when they ran out of the sick leave. That sucks during a pandemic. So we need sick leave, paid sick leave. Big love to the teachers still teaching. Take care of yourself.